All right, so we are back. As you can see, setup is still getting set up, bars, but we'll figure it out. Today, I have to talk to you guys about what just dropped on the Full Sim podcast. Dana White decided he was going to take some shots, and I'm not talking about the dudes that let their cheeks get tapped in the stupid, silly slap league that he does, or a night out in Vegas where he's blowing money on craps like me at Taco Bell on the late night. But I mean his thoughts on the lack of influencer boxing pay-per-views, because I think there's some things he says here that are right. He also mentioned Dillon Danis fighting in the UFC, which he laughed at like we all did Dillon's boxing performance. Regardless, it's time for the breakdown. Dana White on Nelk Boys podcast essentially saying influencer boxing does no pay-per-views. It's a goof show. Is he right or wrong about those pay-per-view numbers? Well, the breakdown, let's go.
And Dillon Danis was there too.
I didn't know that either till after he was out front fighting with everybody, but I saw it on Instagram. But maybe he was in a box or something. Maybe he was in a box with somebody who, I don't know, but
I see that.
I came out and I was like, hey, what's going on?
That can't be Dillon Danis he's talking about, fighting random people in a parking lot for no reason other than to prove he's the tough guy, even though when he tries to prove he's the tough guy actually proves he's not. The one thing I'll agree with Logan Paul on is he told Dillon to his face he's 0 for life in street fights, and he's right. But even that statement from Dana, you already kind of know where his mind is on the next question that's about to be asked about Dillon Danis and potentially fighting in the UFC.
I see that being asked a lot. Dillon Danis in the UFC. Is that something that you'd ever entertain?
I don't know. Do you think he should be? I heard he just retired.
I don't know. I know the UFC is all about like the best.
Yo, I don't care what people try to tell me. Dana's tapped in on social media, bro. He's out here watching. Dillon Danis did a retirement on Ariel Helwani's live show in New York where, let's be honest, what is he retiring from? He's had 2 fights. 2? Well, I mean, I guess the boxing match would make 3, but he didn't even fight. He didn't even show up to fight in the boxing match. So what's he retiring from? He's still on social media. Again, he's posting the waivers in the DMs. Hey, baby. But Dana knowing that, 1, shows he watches Ariel's show still, and 2, shows that he's trying to avoid having Dillon in the UFC, which is a little interesting, seeing Dana's track record as being, if the fight makes sense, regardless who it is, he'll do it. Doesn't seem that way for Dillon, but that maybe is just because they don't think Dillon is UFC caliber.
As a fan, I'd watch it, but I don't know. I know it's like maybe he has to earn his way, just like any other fighter would have to earn their way, right?
Not necessarily. Even though I like that answer from Kyle W. answer there, I think a part of that's true. You know what I mean? I think that Dillon does need to show he can survive in the UFC and actually bring them some value. And someone said put him on the Contender Series. That would be probably where he needs to go, but also I guess because he's a big name on social media would be highly disrespectful to Dillon. But at the same time, it's probably just the hassle of dealing with Dillon Danis, like Dana just talked about, him fighting people outside. That is not somebody that is easily employable when you're causing issues outside of the cage.
Every time he's around, shit's going down. You know what I mean? And we can't have that stuff going on here. We can't, a lot of people will see like when guys get into it on stage or something starts to happen, they're like, oh, they must love this or whatever. No, we don't love it. We don't need that shit to sell fights. And basically what happens is when that
like
goes
the
down,
physical altercations and shit,
the athletic commission goes crazy and people start getting fined and, they come after us. It's our job to keep that shit under control.
So I kind of figured this would be Dana's answer. But yeah, Dana's right here. Dillon almost got the entire fucking event shut down by doing that shit when we were in Austin, Texas. And I remember because 1, Texas's commission is pretty strict with these kind of things. And 2, the commissioner was on stage making sure everybody was weighed in. And I remember him in the moment threatening that he would shut the event down the next day if anything else happened because KSI and Dillon got into a brawl. And even though this is a little bit of a gray statement from Dana because he will employ guys like Conor McGregor who make him money but also will throw dollies through a bus window, and given that his mortal enemy is on it and he wants to call him a dirty fucking rat mate. But there are exceptions to the rule. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, again, Dana will condemn these things but then also use them for promotion. But a guy that does it as consistently as Dillon does and doesn't follow the rules of whatever promotion he's under or commission overseeing the fight he's in. This is the one thing Dana is kind of hesitant to do business with because he understands it costs him dollars and potentially an event. There's an argument that social media attention could replace some of that, but not for a guy like Dillon Danis.
That's why when you see these other events with these guys and everything breaks out like that, it's a fucking... Those guys are... It's
a shit show, right?
Yeah, total unprofessional clown show.
Does the...
Ooh! Essentially there calls influencer boxing a clown show. And to be honest with you, I know that influencer boxing is the circus. I think we all know that it is the circus. It is more WWE than it is professional boxing. And one of the big issues I've had is that line between professional and entertainment. That's where I've always butted heads, whether it's Ma'am Sailor and Misfits or Kingpin and some of the things that happened over there. So I can agree that certain elements of influencer boxing is the circus. Like, yeah, okay, there is a bit of clown show involved here, but I don't think that anyone's ever claimed that they're the same thing. Right? They're not supposed to be the same thing. There needs to be a bit of a difference between the UFC and Misfits boxing and whatever else pops up. But the word he used was professional, and that one seems to be directed at the people running the events, aka Misfits and or Kingpin, whatever he's seen, Triller, maybe even Showtime, I don't know, but whoever he's seen run these things. And there again, I can agree with him that some of these press conferences in influencer boxing do go a bit overboard, where we have guys flying off tables, fucking throwing shit into the crowd, people getting hit with water bottles and chairs being thrown. Wait a second. Conor McGregor threw a bottle at Nate Diaz in their lead up to UFC 202, and Nate threw him back. Didn't Michael Chiesa and Kevin Lee throw hands over the fact that Kevin Lee said something about Michael Chiesa's mother? Didn't Daniel Cormier grab John Jones by the throat and John Jones throw a left hand, breaking the entirety of the press setup for their fight? I'm not saying that Dana's wrong here. Misfits, influencer boxing takes it to another level on the circus aspect. I get that. But let's not act like it doesn't happen in the UFC as well.
The impact that he had on the Prime card with the amount of pay-per-view sales they sold, none of that's like, damn, maybe we give him a try.
It's a fair question there from Steiny.
They got a lot of credit for selling a lot of fucking pay-per-views.
I don't know what they did. I haven't heard about anybody selling a lot of pay-per-views lately.
I think they claimed it was 1.3 million.
I don't know what numbers it actually did. I think he just obviously hyped it up a lot.
Let me tell you this. Let me tell you how hard it is to sell 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. And if you did sell 1.3, if you sold fucking 700,000 pay-per-view buys, they'd be putting on fights fucking 10 times a year. When you hear those kind of numbers fly around the pay-per-view world, they're lying motherfuckers. Don't ever believe that shit.
All right, so let's stop it right there and talk about this. Dana says, do you know how hard it is to sell 1.3 million pay-per-view buys? What I'm not going to do is act like Dana doesn't know the pay-per-view business. He, of course, does. Now, his framing of this whole argument is him going, I don't know anyone doing great pay-per-views right now. And that's obviously talking about the recent fights that have happened. We know, at least we assume, that the pay-per-views for Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou were not as great as originally they thought they would be. Same with name the boxing show outside of Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. And to be fair, the UFC hasn't done a monster pay-per-view this year. I don't know that they've done one over 500 to 600,000 this year. I don't know. These numbers aren't public like they used to be with the UFC. But Dana taking shots at boxing is a tradition as old as fucking Christmas at this point. Like, he does it every chance he can get, which is fair. I like it, actually. I like when Dana gets all fired up and the freaking bald head starts sweating. When he says stuff like, if they did 1.3 million, they'd be running 10 shows a year. I don't know how much Dana White actually knows about the influencer boxing scene or how the setup is with influencer boxing and who actually draws pay-per-views, but I'll explain it quickly. You guys should know this. Misfits Boxing is the #1 influencer boxing promotion in this scene. It's clear. That's not even an argument. Now, they run their pay-per-views based on their stars, as does the UFC, as does every company ever. Problem is, Misfits does not have a wealth of stars. And sure as shittin', when KSI fights, they do it on pay-per-view because he can sell those. Now, they've only done how many this year? KSI Temper, KSI Joe Fournier, KSI Tommy Fury? Is that the only 3 this year? Maybe I'm missing one. But for Dana to say if they're making that kind of money, they run 10 shows a year, KSI's not fighting 10 times in 1 year. And he's the only guy drawing real money right now for the promotion. That's just the truth. So this leads me to believe that Dana doesn't really know what and who is involved in influencer boxing. Even then, you saw him talk about Logan, and I think he's met KSI, but I'm not sure he even knows who that is off the top of his head. The 1.3 million number is the nitty gritty we're going to get down to, because Dana is shocked to even hear that number, right? Like 1.3 million. He says they're fucking liars if they said that. That is the point I want to get down to, because I truly don't know what Misfits did for the Prime card. The only people that I think actually know are the people that need to know, like DAZN and Misfits, and the people at the top of those companies. And DAZN is pretty well known for not releasing pay-per-view numbers publicly unless it's an absolute smash, which by the way is pretty much what every company ever does, especially the UFC, but as he should if this is truly misinformation from Dana White and he's shitting on these pay-per-view numbers as if they're not true. And I don't know what they did. I don't know if it's 1.3, I don't know if it's 1 million, I don't know if it's 700,000, I have no idea. But Mams Taylor, CEO Misfits, had this to say. He said, Prime Card, highest number of pay-per-views sold this year, the end. Now again, that's a shot across the bow at Dana, but they're also talking from two different perspectives, I think. Dana is thinking in his head about pay-per-view audience and revenue, which most of the time is based in the United States, because that's where your big pay-per-view dollars come from. Canada's a pretty big one. With the UFC growing internationally, I'm sure they have a ton more markets. But Mam saying that this is the highest pay-per-view of the year would include Ryan Garcia Tank, would include Jake Paul, Tommy Fury, Sterling versus O'Malley. That would include Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira too. And those are some heavy hitter cards. Again, I don't know the numbers on them. And then he doubled down and said, I know all the real numbers for every event. Don't play with me or I'll go 50 on everyone. But Mam saying he knows everyone's numbers, again, is another shot across the bow to say, and I know your numbers. But here's my thing, and I'm just going to be out in front. If Dana knows that Mams and Misfits and any of these people reporting millions of pay-per-view buys are lying, and he knows the numbers, why not just say the numbers? I mean, I know that's a little bit against decorum, but for Christ's sake, why not just talk about the pay-per-view numbers there? And then Mams Taylor, if he knows the UFC's business, and again, against decorum, I know that, but why give us little teasers? Just say what it is. Just tell us the exact number, because if not, we're all left to just trust word of mouth in this situation. And quite frankly, it's hard to trust anyone when you're saying they're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, I have the number. No, I have it. Just say the fucking number. Otherwise, it looks like Dana's a little bit misinformed on how influencer boxing's actually run, because they do run events 8 to 9 a year, only 3 to 4 being pay-per-view because they don't have as many pay-per-view stars. And it looks like Mams or everyone at DAZN won't say the actual number, leading to this speculation on what the actual number is. Is it higher or lower? And again, it's just a game of who do you trust, and in this situation, it's hard to trust anyone. We just want the number. It would be that simple. Just tell us the number.
I like, Logan and some of these guys are involved in this shit. If you come out and you say that you did 1.3 million pay-per-view buys on your event, you're lying through your fucking teeth. Lying through your teeth.
Yeah.
That amount of money that you would make, they'd be fucking doing pay-per-views all the fucking time. And let me tell you what, every pay-per-view distributor out there would want them, and Showtime wouldn't have went out of business.
But here's another thing that, again, I just think Dana is just, I don't know that he understands a lot about influencer boxing or what's going on, or maybe he does and he's just being facetious on purpose, but they do have a pay-per-view provider. It's with DAZN. They have a 5-year deal. This has been public for a year now. And again, they make the revenue based on the stars they have. It's just like telling Dana White, because you did 2 million plus pay-per-view buys with Conor McGregor and Khabib, you should just have them fight every weekend and fight every year. No, obviously, there's more to it than that. And Dana knows that, which is a crazy, obviously you need the right star to hit that number. And if they did it once, doesn't mean they're going to do it 10 times over.
The production sucks. The fucking fights end up sucking. It's shitty boxing is what it is.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to shit. I don't care what these guys do.
No, they crushed it. They obviously crushed it.
These are just facts.
Yeah.
Facts, eh? We want to talk about the facts, do we? I'm not even going to say that Dana's wrong about this, because yes, the facts are that this is not great boxing, and this is not what you tune in for in influencer boxing. Like, that's clear. The boxing is not going to be as good as the highest of high-level pro boxing. And for people like Dana, not sure about Kyle, who is acting as if he's some sort of combat sports savant that now has a lifelong appreciation for the martial arts. Out of here. You're an MMA bro that also chummed up with Dana and got in with the UFC fighters because of the happy dad and the relationship. But you know what? Kyle's right. You know, now that I think about it, I would never be caught dead watching something that was a shitty form of fighting, or not even a shitty form of fighting, but a shitty form of, let's just say, slapping each other in the face while holding a bar so that you can't defend yourself. It's not even a fight. In fact, it's Dana White's silly fucking stupid ass slap league that all these motherfuckers go and watch, because that's not a shitty form of fighting at all, right? That's not a bunch of people with no skill, no training, no talent, desperate enough for money that they get on stage and slap each other senseless and secure that free lifetime membership into the CTE club just for $2,000 and a couple of live streamers on Rumble going, wow, man, did you see that? Shut the fuck up. Like I said, though, these guys, an appreciation for the finer elements of fighting, not entertained by the circus or shitty knockoff wannabe combat sports at all. Nah, not these guys.
When we talk about it, we've been talking about what's bad for boxing, and boxing's dead for the last fucking 30 years, but this shit's still going on. But, you know, there isn't the money in it that everybody thinks there is.
Yeah.
There's not. And there's no business there at the end of the day. It's all just a bunch of hype and bullshit. And shitty boxing. It's shitty fights.
You think they'll ever? Is there?
The boxing business is, at least in the grand scale, has been in the decline outside of a handful of fighters for a very long time. And I'm going to do it because I always do. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is the only player in town right now willing to just throw money at boxing endlessly with no real idea on return for that money. But that doesn't mean that the business of boxing is doing well. That just means they have shitloads of money and they're willing to throw it at their favorite fighters to come and fight for the kingdom or Riyadh season or whatever the fuck. And meanwhile, on the other side of things, the UFC is more profitable year over year over year, and the business of the UFC is booming. Now, you could talk about fighter pay, which is bad in both sports outside of the top of boxing and the top of the UFC, but it's also because Dana, quite frankly, just runs a better business than boxing does. He is a single promoter that pretty much has a monopoly on the business, but also they're fiscally responsible. They run a tight ship with production, and they put on fights people want to see. At the end of the day, that's what matters, especially at the highest level of the sport. Putting on the fights people want to see in influencer boxing means putting on the best faces, the influencers we want to see. But in Dana's line of work, you have to make fights people want. That's why boxing has declined and was on the verge of dying until these last couple of years, and why the UFC is thriving. All right, so there's Dana White talking about influencer boxing. Like I said, he's right about a lot of the things he says as a general point, right? The fact that boxing as a business is not doing well and hasn't been doing well for a while. The fact that we don't really know what the pay-per-view numbers are in most cases with these boxing cards, because a lot of them are inflated to serve the greater ego of promoters. And the fact that influencer boxing is a bit of a circus. It is a bit of the entertainment show gone past the actual sport and the professionality of the sport. But again, Dana White is not only participating in the circus with Power Slap, but also got his start in what was called human cockfighting, which was the circus that people thought MMA was. I'm not saying they're on the same trajectory, but again, you can't throw stones at influencer boxing when you run a company prioritizing getting slapped in the face with no recoil. That leaves people hitting the floor like their favorite song came on at the club. Dana is the GOAT in the fight business. He is the pioneer of this shit, and he is probably one of the smartest and most forward-thinking men in combat sports. But it doesn't mean he's always right, especially in the case of influencer boxing, which he seems not to pay attention to at all. But that's my thoughts on this. You guys let me know in the comments. Was Dana right here in calling out influencer boxing on their BS pay-per-view numbers? Like I said, in some ways, yes. In other ways, in my opinion, no. But I don't have those answers. And again, I don't know that Dana does, or anybody outside of DAZN, Misfits, and the people that work there ever will. But what happens to, as Dana calls it, the going out of business sale of the boxing industry? Is influencer boxing truly about to thrive, or as Uncle Dana thinks, about to take a dive? I don't have those answers, but guess we'll find out.